Hi, welcome back to the Style Experiment. In this series, I explore different illustration styles through a variety of themes while documenting my creative process. If you'd like to know where I started this series in the first place, you can check out episode 1 after finishing this episode. Without further ado, let's begin. This is an ongoing illustration series of mine that envisions a natural history written by sentient animals after humanity's extinction. Once threatened with extinction, these species build civilizations of their own and document their lives and the life around them in the form of diary entries. Each illustration features an anthropomorphic animal protagonist and incorporates one plant and one mineral. The animals and plants portrayed are all endangered species or species with critically low populations on Earth today. The full series is planned to include multiple illustrations and may eventually be developed into a graphic novel and an oracle card deck. Today, I'll be introducing 3 pieces that help define the visual direction of this series. As the very first piece created for this series, the polar bear is undoubtedly one of the most recognizable endangered species to many people. The concept itself is quite straightforward, a polar bear writing a natural history journal. The accompanying plant and mineral are the Arctic poppy and sodalite respectively, and the symbolic meanings behind this composition are clarity, composure, and quiet strength. I first practiced drawing several polar bear sketches and selected the poses I liked most, then combined elements from those studies to create the polar bear I had envisioned. Next, I moved on to drawing the Arctic poppy and the sodalite. Rather than depicting the sodalite as a realistic mineral specimen, I chose to combine collage techniques with digital painting, creating irregular textures and layered surface patterns within the stone. The aurora in the background was inspired by the lithograph style that became popular during the 19th century. Both of these reference images probably come from the National Encyclopedia series published by the renowned Scottish publisher William Mackenzie. At the time, this old lithographic printing technique was often used to document mysterious natural phenomena. I'm deeply fascinated by the sense of texture and visual depth created through delicate hatching lines and grainy surfaces in these antique printing methods, and I greatly admire how artists of that era capture the movement of the aurora using such purely linear visual language. Because of this, I wanted to reinterpret that classical texture and incorporate it into a contemporary illustration style. One detail I especially want to mention is the border design. I wanted to recreate an effect similar to risograph printing, where the layers and shapes are often slightly misaligned, so I intentionally offset the stars and moon a little, allowing thin white edges to show through, giving the flat image the feeling of a physically printed piece. The creative process behind this piece was a little different from the previous one. For the polar bear illustration, I first completed rough sketches of the 3 main elements before planning the overall composition. But for this piece, I began by developing the entire composition and creating a full layout sketch from the start. Once the layout sketch was finished, I moved on to the main character, the medium tree finch. Since I wanted to depict the finch in a seated pose, I selected an old photograph of a woman sitting in a chair as my pose reference. I first sketched the woman's seated posture and overall pose based on the original photograph, then transformed the head and hands into bird-like forms. I also incorporated the colors and structure of the finch's wings into the outfit design, allowing everything to merge into a cohesive whole. Because the median tree finch has relatively dark plumage, I wanted to preserve delicate feather textures even within deep black tones. While painting the head, I experimented with combining the softness of graphite sketching with the highly structured hatching style found in etching. Etching actually predates the lithography I mentioned earlier. It first appeared around the late 15th century and reached its peak between the 17th and 19th centuries. Here I've put together a brief comparison between lithography and etching. If you're interested in these classical techniques, feel free to pause and take a look. The Socotra dragon tree in the background was relatively simple and relaxing to paint. The more challenging element was the black opal. Since black opals naturally emit iridescent, multicolored reflections, I had to carefully paint each small section of light refraction and color gradient individually. Fortunately, roughly half of the large mineral is obscured by the finch, so I reduced the level of detail in that area and focused instead on the edges of the stone and the smaller mineral fragments. The symbolic meanings behind this composition are mystery, metamorphosis, and profound depth. This piece incorporates my extended imagination inspired by The Little Prince. In this interpretation, a Darwin's fox becomes a pilot after the passing of his owner. The owner's name is Antoine, a reference to the author of The Little Prince. The fox's pose and costume were referenced from 3 antique photographs. The scene depicts the fox, having heard that a meteor shower would fall tonight. This Darwin's fox takes flight in a small airplane named Garnet, left to him by his former human companion, soaring over a garden filled with halfeti roses. I drew the rose petals in 2 variations. One was based on rose reference images from a purchased set, and the other drew from rose reference images found online. To achieve a more accurate structure, I used a dot-to-dot tracing method to construct the outlines. After that, the coloring of the petals was not strictly based on the reference images. A fun fact about the dot-to-dot tracing method. Although this approach may seem surprisingly simple, its concept is likely related to a transfer technique used in Renaissance fresco painting known as spolvero. During the Renaissance of the 15th and 16th centuries, Michelangelo is known to have used this transfer method while working on the frescoes of the Sistine Chapel. The artist would first create a full-scale drawing, then perforate the outlines with a series of tiny holes. By dusting charcoal powder through these holes, countless small dots would be transferred onto the wall, allowing the image to be reconstructed almost like a giant connect-the-dots puzzle. This transfer technique was widely used during the Renaissance, and artists such as Raphael employed similar methods in their work. Here's a brief introduction to the spolvero transfer process and the fresco painting technique. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like to take a closer look. For the background, I wanted to evoke a sense of retro scientific exploration, so I referenced the works of the 19th century astronomical illustrator Étienne Léopold de Trouvelot. I preserved the distinctive sense of motion in his depiction of meteors, but to align with the adventurous theme of the Darwin's fox, I adjusted the color palette and brushwork, layering jittering lines and enhancing the color of the meteors so that they appear both like shooting stars and falling fireworks. The symbolic meanings of this piece are communication, harmony, and emotion. Unlike the previous 2 pieces, I placed a short excerpt from the fox's journal in the lower border, as the central theme of this series is the diaries left behind by these creatures. That's it for this experiment. I'd also love to know which piece you like the most. I'll continue experimenting with other themes in the future. Until next time, live long and prosper.